Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to AlphaBiolabs breakfast webinar entitled Head Hair Drug Testing, How Does It Work? It's really great to have so many of you join us this morning. In terms of introduction, my name is Andrew Priestley, and I'm the marketing manager for the legal sector here at AlphaBiolabs. And I'm joined by my colleague, Ashley Hodgkinson, who's our sample collections manager. Ashley also has extensive testing of DNA, drug and alcohol testing in the UK, and she'll be leading the webinar this morning with myself acting as your facilitator. So in terms of the agenda, conscious to keep the time to within 30 minutes. So we'll start by answering two questions. How are drugs stored in head hair? And then how do we test head hair strands for drugs? Ashley will then talk about the difference between an overview analysis and a segmented analysis, and then also how to interpret the test results that you receive back. We'll then finish off by just looking at the most common ways that people try to cheat the testing system, and there'll also be a Q&A session towards the end if we have enough time. Now, we're using the Zoom technology this morning, so as an attendee by default, both your camera and microphones are switched off, but you can use the Q&A function, which you should have access to, and you can use that throughout to ask any questions. So please ask any question at any point that you think of a question, and we will do our best to answer that towards the end. If we don't have time to answer all the questions, what we will do is tomorrow you'll receive an email with a recording of this webinar, and on the web page where the webinar recording is, you'll be able to see answers to the questions that you've asked today. We'll also be issuing optional polls during the webinar, and there is a short post-webinar survey. Please do take the time to complete those. Your feedback is really invaluable to us in terms of our future planning for these webinars. If you have any technical issues or anything else during the next 30 minutes, you can also use the chat function. That will send a message to myself, and I'll do my best to help you. Okay, so with that, we're going to get started. So we're going to start with an opening poll, which I'm going to launch now on the screen. It's just one question. If you could kindly take a moment to answer it. That should be appearing on your screen now. So the question we're asking is, how many days after the use of a drug will it first be detected in a sample of head hair? And I'll just give you a few moments for all of you to answer that. Okay, I think most of you have done that. I'll just give you a few more seconds. Okay, that's great. Thanks for all your responses. I'm going to end the poll now, and I'm just going to share the results with you. So the question, how many days after the use of a drug will it first be detected in a sample of head hair? There's 4 options there, and you can see by the responses, all those options have been responded to by a number of you. The most popular one there looks like 3 to 5 days. 42% of you think it's that. But the correct answer is actually 2 weeks. So 24% of you have got that right. And I'm going to hand over to Ashley now, and she'll talk to you in a bit more detail about that. Ashley.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for joining us. As Andrew said, we're going to cover quite a number of different topics during this webinar. So if you do have any questions, please do make use of the Q&A function, and hopefully we'll get a chance to come back to them at the end. But today I'm just going to cover a few different things about what to consider when looking to instruct to do head hair testing for drugs, just so that you can make better informed decisions about what would be best for your client based on what samples are available and the results that you're looking to ascertain. So to start off, I'm just going to talk briefly about how drugs are stored within the head hair sample, how we get the results that we're able to provide to you. So each hair follicle in your head has its own individual blood supply. So once you ingest a drug, that's absorbed into the bloodstream, and then eventually it will grow out through the hair as it's stored in the medulla of each hair follicle. When this process happens, it can take roughly 7 to 10 days from ingestion to go into the blood supply and then grow out through the root of the head hair. So this links back to the question that Andrew just asked you on the opening poll. Because of the time that from ingestion to growth into the hair sample, we always state that you should allow 2 weeks from ingestion for that drug to be present within the hair sample and therefore the results that we are able to provide. And this is really important, especially if you're looking to cover specific timeframes. You need to take those 2 weeks growth rate into consideration. So if you were looking, for instance, to get a report from today, you wouldn't be able to take the sample today. You must wait the 2 weeks for that drug ingestion to grow through into the hair follicle in order for it to be present within the report. And the time frame that the results will cover are always stated on our reports as well. So you will be able to tell if a time frame that you're looking for was included within that period. How do we test for head hair for drugs? So we are looking for persistent drug users. We're not looking for one-off use in a head hair drug sample. If you were looking for one-off use, you would need to use an alternative method. Because we are looking at a longer time frame, so up to 12 months, we're reporting in what we refer to as segments, and we'll come on to this in just a moment. So we're looking at time frames as a whole. We're not looking at individual days or weeks or specific times of the day where someone has ingested a drug, and therefore this is more beneficial for persistent drug users. We're looking at drug groups and their metabolites. So for those of you who have instructed us before, you may already know this, but we give you a list of drug groups to choose from. And within those drug groups, there are other metabolites. So for instance, if you instructed us to test for opiates, that would cover things like codeine, dihydrocodeine. It would also cover morphine and heroin. So they're all within that one drug group. Now we're going to come on to what drugs we can test for later on, but if there is a specific drug that you want us to test for that you don't see on our panel, get in touch with us, because even if it isn't a metabolite of a drug that is on the list, it is something that we'll probably be able to help you with anyway. Theoretically speaking, we can go back as far as your donor's head hair will allow, your client's head hair will allow, so whatever the length of it. But based on the Society of Hair Testing, the guidelines that we follow, up to 12 months is the most realistic and accurate time frame that we can provide. So 12 centimeters of head hair is the most that we would test in the laboratory. So I've spoken about length of hair time frames. The head hair grows at an average rate of 1 centimeter per month. So if your donor has 3 centimeters of head hair, then we're looking to cover a 3-month period, realistically speaking. We can do this all the way back up to 12 months, like I said, but that's if your client has 12 centimeters of head hair. So if we were testing my hair today, we would be able to collect it and do a test for up to 12 months if that is what was required. However, for someone with shorter hair, you would be limited by the length of the sample dictating the time frame that we would be able to cover. And we report on hair drug testing in 2 different ways. We report either as an overview or as segmented. And for those of you that have used us before, you'll know that this is an option on the referral form. But what does it mean? What are the options and why would you pick one or the other? So we'll start looking at an overview. So an overview analysis is a much kind of broader time frame. So instead of looking at every month individually, so each centimeter of hair by itself, we're going to look at a wider time frame, and that's up to 3 months. So each overview covers up to 3 months as a whole. This type of analysis is beneficial for if you are aware of the likelihood of your client's result. So if, for example, you were representing myself today and I said I'd never touched the drug, there was no way that it would be found in the presence of my hair, then you may opt for an overview, knowing, based on what I've informed you of, that it's likely to be a negative result. So you don't need to look at each individual month because all months are going to test negative. And that's where you would look at using an overview for the analysis. Again, we can cover up to 12 months. As you can see on the graph here, we've tried to make it a little bit more visual to help explain this. But say, for instance, we had a 12 centimeter sample, which would cover 12 months, and we instructed for an overview, you would get 4 individual results for this time frame, each one covering a 3-month period as a whole. So on your report, you would get 4 individual results for this time frame, the first 3 months, the second 3 months, all the way up to make a 12 months as a whole time frame. The limitations of an overview, why some people opt for segmented over overview, is basically what we were just talking about. So because you're looking at timeframes as a whole, if you are unsure of what the results are, or you're wanting to look at patterns and trends within a sample, an overview isn't necessarily always the best option. Some people want to look at it in further detail, so they want to look at each month individually, not in 3-month groups. For instance, if I was being tested and I'd abstained for the first 2 months, but then I'd used in the 3rd month, I may then show as a positive in my overview sample because I'd used during that time frame and it was enough to show within my result. However, if I'd have had that month by month, you'd have seen more of a trend where maybe I'd abstained in the beginning and then used, or I'd reduced my usage over that time. So like I say, for someone who knows what the results are going to be, or if you're looking at an initial indication of someone's drug use, an overview is a good option for you. But if you're wanting to look at patterns and trends, you'd want to go for a segmented test. So this is what a segmented test looks like. So we've used the same graph so that hopefully this makes sense compared to the previous slide. So here is a hair sample measuring 12 centimeters, covering 12 months. If you'd have opted for this segmented rather than an overview, you would get 12 individual results on your report, 1 representing each month. So 12 individual results, 1 for each centimetre, 1 for each month. And this is really helpful when we're looking at those patterns and trends of someone who has misused drugs, to see if someone has previously used and then started to either wean themselves off or abstain from use. This would be really beneficial. Same with someone who is maybe following a program, a rehabilitation program, and you're just wanting to see that their usage is declining month on month. It's useful for many things, and it would be in those situations where we would recommend that you get a segmented test. And like I say, you can always contact us for help and guidance on this. If you're not sure what the best option for your client would be, get in contact with us and we can advise based on what you're looking to ascertain from the results. A little bit about the collection process. We do call it a hair strand test here at AlphaBiolabs. Unfortunately, it's not just a single strand. And we do explain this at length when booking with your donors. But just to clarify this in case you do get asked a question, when we are taking a sample, we are having to cut this directly from the scalp. And this links back to the first bit of information that we spoke about, where her hair grows from the root with that blood sample. So the root is the more recent time frame that we can test for. So we would always have to cut directly from the root. And unfortunately, but being completely honest, it will leave a bald patch for each sample taken. We will do our best to make that as discreet as possible. And we do discuss this with your client at the time as to how they wear their hair and where we would take it from before any sample is collected, but we would have to cut it from the root. Most cases require 2 samples of head hair, both around about 200 individual strands. However, depending on your requirements, depends upon the number of samples that we need to collect. But like I say, this would all be discussed at the time of testing. So what do we do if you don't have enough head hair or your client doesn't have enough head hair? I've gone on and on about we can test up to 12 centimetres, we can test whatever your client has. If they've got 3 centimetres, we can go back 3 months. But what happens if they don't have anything at all? Or if the sample that they have on their head isn't going back far enough as what you or the court would like? And we have 3 other options. So the first option is to collect a body hair sample. And we can take this from most places. I've listed a few here. So underarm, beard, chest, leg, back, forearm, whatever your client is comfortable with. But this will provide up to 12 months as an overview. So it can't be segmented. It can't be broken down month by month. It would be a 12-month time frame as a whole, and you would get 1 result for that time period. 2 other options that we've got are toenails. Toenails, again, same as body hair, provide up to 12 months as an overview, and fingernails up to 6 months as an overview. So it's something to consider if you do have a client who is either bald or is refusing to provide a sample of head hair. There are some other options out there for you, but again, give us a call and we can talk you through them. So what drugs can we test for? We're showing on the screen now the list of the most common drugs that we're requested to do, and these are the ones on our referral form. So if you did want to have a look at what we were able to provide for you, it is all listed on there. But there are also a large variety of drugs that aren't listed that we are able to test for. So if you do have one that's not on the list, like I say, get in touch and we'd be able to advise you further. We've just listed the most common drugs on the referral form. So just to recap what we've just spoken about, the basis of what we are able to show you in a drug test report entirely depends on what samples are available from your client. So if you had a client with 3 centimeters of head hair, you've got 2 options. We can either take it as 3 months as an overview, so just one result for that time period as a whole, or you can have it segmented, which would provide 3 individual results, 1 for each month that the hair sample covered. Same with your 6-month test, but this time you'll get 2 results for your overview, so each covering a 3-month period, or you would get 6 individual results if you opted to have that segmented. Like I've just spoken about, we also are able to offer testing for body hair or nails, but the most preferred method would be head hair because it can be more specific time frame wise. So if head hair is available, we would always advise that you opt for that. So I'm going to hand back over to Andrew now. He's going to do your second poll, but please do send some questions through on the Q&A and we'll link back to them at the end.
That's great. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, so as Ashley says, please do take the opportunity to use the Q&A facility to ask any questions that you have. Right, so the second poll, I'm just going to launch that for you now. Just 2 questions, just sort of going over what Ashley's just covered. Here we go. So I'll give you a few moments to answer those, please. It's good, lots of responses coming through. Just give you a few more seconds. I think most of you answered those 2 questions now. Then I'll share the results with you. Okay, I think we're just about there. So I'm just going to end the poll now. And let's share the results. So first question, what is the maximum window of detection for drug usage that can be found with head hair testing? It's quite clear there. So 93% of you got that right. It is up to 12 months realistically. And question 2, if your client provided a 6 centimeter head hair sample for an overview only, how many results would you get? And 64% of you got the correct answer there. So it's 2 results, each covering a 3-month time period. So well done to all those of you who got those questions right, and thank you for doing that. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and with that, I'm going to hand back to Ashley.
Okay, so how do we interpret the test results once we have them? So there are 2 options for test results when you instruct us to do drug testing through head hair. And the first one is called a certificate of analysis. And this is just the data that we are able to provide to you. So what the results state, what the cutoff level for the testing was, and what, if any, was detected within the sample. This is a very basic report, and it's for people who just want the facts and the figures of what we found. Again, this is useful similarly to an overview if you're just looking at finding out a base result, so where your client is starting, if they're going into a program of recovery, potentially to do a comparison in a further 6 months' time, or if you know that your client will be negative, so if they've abstained or never used drugs, and you just need that negative result. If you want anything else, if you want information about how medication that your client may be taking has affected it, if you want background into how the testing was done, if you want further information as to what the results mean, so the interpretation of them, then you're going to want to opt for a statement of witness report. And this will give you all the information that you need to know about your client's drug test results. And it also means that if you have any questions that you ask us, we can show you where in that report they're located. Whereas with your certificate of analysis, if you did have any questions about the sample, we would have to go back to our scientists to get that information for you. So we would always recommend that you go with a statement of witness if you're looking for anything realistically other than a negative result, and because that will give you all the information that you need alongside those results. So how do people try and cheat the system? I know we mentioned this in the beginning about we were going to cover this. These are the most common ways that we've seen here at AlphaBiolabs where people have come in and tried to kind of get around doing a drug test necessarily using their own head hair. So the first one is most people come in wearing wigs if they're going to try and cheat the system. So they will glue that onto their head before attending their appointment. And we cover a lot of questions when we are doing our sample collection process. So we have a consent form and things like that. And we'll also have a look at the hair before we take the sample to be happy that the client's happy where we're taking it from and that we're happy with where we're taking it from. And it's usually at that point where it becomes quite obvious that the client is wearing a wig. So we've seen that one a number of times. We've also had where people bring a sample with them. So they'll cut it beforehand and bring it with them. Unfortunately, again, we can't accept that. We need to be sure that it's come from the person who we are there to test. So we wouldn't accept that either. They send someone else for their appointment. So that would be caught in the chain of custody where a photograph is taken at the time of the appointment. And also donors are asked to provide identification, ideally photographic. They'll shave off all the head and body hair. So if you were listening earlier, you'll know that nails would be the next option for us. And there are some other things that we can look into, other methods of testing if needed, but nails would be the next ideal in that scenario. If they've cut off all the fingernails and toenails as well, if they know what we're about and they know that we're coming, like I say, there are other options, but we do see that as well. Or they apply cosmetic treatments or straighten the hair in an attempt to reduce the drug concentration that's present. And we get this question quite a lot. So we just wanted to cover this kind of on its own. So when we collect a sample from your client, we'll ask a number of different questions about how they maintain the hair, if they apply any chemical or heat hair treatments to it. And this all allows our scientists to take it into consideration when writing a report, because there are some things that can affect drug testing in head hair, and particularly because bleaching and dyeing can strip the hair. So I've just put a little table on here as to how those can be affected. So bleaching, dyeing, perming, or excessive straightening of the hair could sometimes result in a possible false negative for drug tests. Hairsprays, gels, excessive cleaning of it would have little to no effect. But there are other things that we need to consider. So we do always ask this on our consent form at the time of testing so that it can be taken into consideration. I mentioned chain of custody just briefly. So this is how we confirm that we've got the correct donor at the time of the appointment and that the samples that we've taken from those are the ones that come to our laboratory and are the ones that are reported on. And this is really important, the most important part of the testing, not only for yourselves to be sure that we've tested the right person, but also for your clients so that they can be sure that it is their sample that's been tested and it is their sample that's been reported on. And we do this in a number of different ways, case reference numbers that are linked on every piece of paperwork, photographs of the donor identification, tracked samples all the way to the laboratory. So if you do have any questions on the chain of custody, just because of the time we're on, please do come and ask us. I'd be more than happy to explain the full process of that for you. So which test do I choose? I have a client who I know needs to do some form of drug testing, be that through head hair, body hair, or nails. What do I need to consider? And these are the most important things. So what you want to find out, why are we doing this test? What do we want to know? If you want to know patterns and history of drug use, then you're going to want to go for a segmented hair test. If you are just wanting to prove that your donor abstained and they know that they have and you know that they have, then an overview would be sufficient with a certificate of analysis at the end. So really wanting to know what you want to get out of the testing. What time frame you want to cover, that's really important so that we can check with your client that they have a suitable sample, and if not, discuss options with you. And then how is your testing going to be funded? So all of these things need to be taken into consideration. And these are things that you can discuss with us over the telephone or via email so that we can help you make the best decision for you and your client.
That's great. Thanks, Ashley. So almost at the end now. I'm just going to launch the final poll in a second. That's one question. And then we'll have a look at any questions that have been asked, and we'll perhaps answer a couple of those. So if you do have any more questions, then just use the opportunity now to add that into the Q&A facility. I will just launch the closing poll for you as well. There we go. It's just one question. We just want to really get your honest feedback. Did you feel that the webinar this morning was beneficial to you or not? There you go. 3 options. Lots of responses coming through. We'll just give you a few more moments. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So just asking, has your knowledge of head hair drug testing improved as a result of attending this morning's webinar? And it's great to see that 90% of you said yes, absolutely. There's a couple of you there said to a certain extent, but would like to learn more. That's absolutely fine. There's a couple there that feel it hasn't, which you know, we want your honest feedback. So it'd be interesting to know why maybe you felt that was. Perhaps in the post-webinar survey, if you want to expand on that, that would be great. But it sounds like it was beneficial for most of you, so that's great to hear. And sorry, just a bit of a technical issue there. I just should be able to see those results now. There we go. Okay, so thanks very much for all your feedback on that. So I'm just going to hand back to Ashley. Ashley, got any questions that we can answer in the next couple of minutes?
Yeah, we've had a few come through actually. Some of them are exactly the same, which is great, and something that I didn't actually cover. So the main question that's coming through more than once is about the length of a nail sample for testing. So what is required from each client? So with testing that we do here, we always take 2 samples as a minimum, an A and a B. The A is tested in the laboratory and the B is kept on record in case there's a dispute. So the short answer is, for each client, we would take 5 nails in one and 5 nails in the other, 1 hand in the A, 1 hand in the B, or the same with the feet. There's no real minimum. We can do it off 1 nail if it measures over 5 millimeters. So that's why we take a clipping from each nail. But as long as they're long enough to cut, generally there'll be a sufficient sample. It's just being able to get a sample from the nail. There's some questions about alcohol use, but this is purely based on drugs, so I'll answer them at the end. Does different types of ethnicity change reporting? No, I'm assuming this is coming from a DNA report that someone might have seen where we do ask about the ethnicity. That's purely to do with the DNA side of things, nothing to do with drugs or alcohol. So that wouldn't be included on any drug or alcohol report that we do here. There's quite a lot of questions, Andrew. I'm just conscious of time. Do you want to move on and we'll answer those at the end?
Yeah, so that's fine. So really great to get all those questions coming through. And as I explained before, what we will do is when you'll receive an email tomorrow with a recording of the webinar, and we'll also have answers to all your questions on there. So apologies if we've not had enough time this morning to answer your specific question, but we will get an answer to you by tomorrow. Okay, so thanks very much, Ashley. Just to finish off very briefly, so why choose AlphaBiolabs? Sample collection available from any UK address. We also, different to other people in that we do have UK walk-in centres. We've got 11 walk-in centres around the UK where your client could attend and we would take a free collection there. Our drug test results are issued within 3 to 5 working days as standard, and we provide user-friendly reports, which Ashley's talked about. You'd also have access to dedicated account and case managers throughout the testing process. And of course, we are UCAS accredited with ISO 17025 and ISO 9001. We also have special promotion at the moment until the end of June. There's 15% off all legal drug testing. You can simply call us on the number there, 333 600 1300, or email us at testing@alphabiolabs.com. If you just quote drug 15 when you request the quotation, we'll ensure that that discount is applied. Another way you can request a quote is obviously on our website as well, alphabiolabs.co.uk. Also wants to mention that we're actually attending the Resolution National Conference in Birmingham next week. So I would expect that some of you are probably members and you might be there. It'd be fantastic to see you. We'll have a stand there, so please do come over and say hello. Myself and another colleague will be in attendance, so it'd be great to see some of you there. And we're actually sponsoring one of the awards at the evening day. It's the Innovation Champion Award. So just to finish off, when we finish, there will be a very short survey that will appear. Please do take 30 seconds to complete that. We do really appreciate your feedback. It is invaluable to us and it helps us to plan for future webinars. So please do take a moment to do that. So please do get in touch. We are the experts in legal DNA, drug and alcohol testing. There's the main methods of contact again on the screen for you. We're also on social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you're also on there, perhaps look us up, give us a follow, and we'll follow you back. And one last mention, our Giving Back campaign. For every instruction we do receive from you, we'll donate £5 to 4 incredible charities who support some of the UK's most vulnerable children and families. It's just another reason to choose AlphaBiolabs. So with that, all it leaves me to say is thank you so much for your time this morning. Wish you well, have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you soon on a future AlphaBiolabs webinar. Thanks very much and goodbye.